I want to share a couple things that have really kind of gotten me thinking about conversations, because conversations are obviously something that everybody does all the time, and that you guys are doing with yourselves right now as you're listening. How do you have a great conversation? What makes for a good conversation, let alone a great conversation? All conversations have a beginning, a middle, and an end, much like all stories. They start somewhere, they go somewhere else, they end somewhere different. If you got those three things, you have a conversation. And all conversations start somewhere. How do you have a conversation with a friend, with a coworker, with a family member? You say, hello. Or you say, here's what we're here to talk about. You create a context. And the context gives you this term that is borrowed from chess of a gambit, a first move, a first position. It could be a question, could be a statement, something that gets you into the place where you are now talking about something. You're negotiating whatever it is that you're going to discuss. And then ultimately there's this counter gambit, a response. How are you responding to that? You're negotiating what you're going to talk about. You're negotiating where you're going to go. And the worst conversations that you get into are the ones that simply cycle through this. And you're not really going anywhere. You're talking about nothing. Maybe you've been on a conversation, a sales call where you can't seem to get started. Maybe you've been in a bad date that you just keep asking the same questions over again and the answers don't lead you anywhere. But if you can agree on a place to go, you can find this gambit and find a counter gambit, a response, then it gets you to the place where you can start to exchange stories, meaningful information, the experiences that you've had that have changed you, and the experiences other people have had that have changed them. Nothing particularly mind-blowing here, but the best experiences you have in life, and here, obviously we're in LA, it's a land created around story, and the telling of story, the sharing of stories in lots of different media. I got a bunch of filmmakers here who tell stories, but we are all telling stories both to ourselves and to each other all the time. And if you can get into the place where you can start to exchange that information fluidly, it allows for banter, this fun discussion about what's happening within a story, what's happening around a story, what's happening to the story. You can start to joke about the things that you find unusual, the things you find interesting within the story, and that ultimately elevates the conversation to a new place, because it allows for people to share, to understand, to experience something that's they wouldn't have otherwise. And the best conversations you've probably been in are the ones that just cycle through this. You go meet a good friend, you talk about a couple things, and then immediately you start to tell stories about something that you saw, something you did, something that was powerful, meaningful, interesting, engaging, that took you to a new place. And this elevation can happen again and again and again, and you can go for hours. But ultimately, you want to move back in. You retreat into a place that recontextualizes the experience that you've had. You're now trying to frame the stories that you've told, the conversations you've had within the context initially that you set up. So you're moving eventually towards an exit, place where you can button up the whole thing and start to understand the experience that you've had on a phone call, in a pitch meeting, with a friend. And then you create an intention. What are you going to do with this information, these experiences that you've had collectively together? And you guys probably done this, you do this all the time without even thinking, everybody does. But when I was an improviser, this would come up all the time. Scenes would break down because they would fail to, they would fail to start to get into places where people could tell stories and exchange meaningful information, because they would often get caught in this gambit and response. People were not listening, they weren't yes-anding, they weren't affirming the thing that was being said. Or they would sometimes, in the worst case scenario, jump from these introductions straight to an exit, because there was nothing to talk about. Sometimes you can get caught in this initial part and then try to exit, but then you get bounced back and forth. But all conversations are going to have this flow. And if you can start to be present to where you are in that, it'll give you an insight about where to shift it and how to maneuver within that space. Make sense? How does that go? So obviously, you got to start somewhere. Break the ice. How perfect is this? It's February 1st. Tomorrow is? Groundhog Day. So one of the early scenes in Groundhog Day was Andy McDowell and Bill Murray having coffee. And he picks up the creamer and he starts drinking it. And you can see, based on her response, she's a little bit put off, but she's also a little intrigued because he's done something unusual. There's something that draws this particular thing out. And usually in introductions, the beginnings of conversations, you're looking for these unusual things. From the improv world, you're trying to find the thing that stands out in your mind. And this is ultimately the thing that can break the ice. Getting to that place where you have an interesting gambit, there's an interesting question, there's something that draws your attention in, that's meaningful to you, so it can in turn be meaningful to someone else. And once you find that thing that breaks the ice, this allows you to get into the space of telling stories. This, by the way, is Bill Murray from a later movie, Lost in Translation. And one of the scenes that allows him to break the ice is where he all of a sudden stands up and delivers a song, does karaoke for a big group of people. He butchers a number of different songs, but he's able to make people laugh, and it opens them up and creates a space where they can then share. And this is the job of stories. They create a space where other people can understand you, and you in turn can understand them. And in calls, conversations, pitches, once you're in that space, you want to live in that space. On my walk over here, I was stopped by Howlin' Ray's, and I saw the long line. I walked into this little shop on the side, and I saw the proprietor, who sort of looked at me and asked me how I was doing without even asking me why I was there. And I said the thing that was unusual to me, which was that there was a long line. And the long line started a conversation about something that I had read about hot chicken, and he started to talk about how popular it was, and I asked him about what was going on. And then all of a sudden, we were talking about jiu-jitsu and growing up in Southern California, and him learning how to do jiu-jitsu after surfing and doing all these other things. And I had a whole rich world that I could now inhabit. And he knew about me because we were talking about the fact that I live in New York and I'm coming over here and I'm exploring all these different spaces. And this all happened in the span of about 10 or 15 minutes. All because you can start to tell stories about yourselves, about things that have been meaningful to you. And that ultimately leads you to a place, which I say money, but friend keep, or however you want to think about it, where you can crystallize and sum up the experience that you've had. This Life Aquatic, Steve Zissou, he plays kind of the patriarch of this big family, but one of the things that he's able to do is he's able to kind of bring everybody together for a common purpose. And when you're able to assimilate the things that have happened early on with the breaking of the ice, the stories that have been told, and create a context or recontextualize the purpose that you have for being there, all of a sudden it transforms not just you, but your whole business. And the reason I reference Bill Murray in all of these is because Bill Murray has a reputation. Some of you guys may know this. People who bump into Bill Murray never forget they bump into Bill Murray. He transforms people's life experience of celebrities because he does unusual things. Not as a gimmick, but because he's truly engaged with someone's life and experience. He will take them to places that they don't expect, and then he disappears. They never see him again, they never hear from him again, but they remember. And one of the things he says before he leaves them, it's all over the media, is nobody will believe this. And people recite that, and then they hear it at the end, and then nobody really believes it, so it acquires this mythology. So people can start telling stories about the experiences that they've had in the conversations with him. And in the best of all possible worlds, the conversations that you have, even if they're sales calls, pitches, meetings with your team, will take people to a place that was unexpected and unusual. But before you do that, it starts with you. You have to be calm, connected, and engaged with what's going on. So in order to relax, or I should say in order to be in that space, you need to first be in your body, be present to how you're feeling in a conversation, whether it's over the phone, over email, because sometimes you can be in an email conversation, over text, whatever the medium, you want to be engaged in what's happening with you physically in the moment. It moves into your mind, what's happening with you mentally in the moment, and ends in this space in between, in this spirit that you can start to work with. And the way to think about engaging with your body first is to think about your posture. How are you sitting or standing? How are you embodying space? Because how you embody space gives you how you're going to embody a conversation. You will be in a conversation. So I can see you kind of resting your arm here. You've got your legs crossed here. Aaron's in the back with his hands behind, nodding at me, like for some reason, I don't know, probably because I'm awesome. You're sort of twisting the cap, not sure where I'm going to go, but you guys have a physical space that you embody. And your posture, in turn, gives you your breath. The air moving in and out of your lungs, that in turn gives you your voice. The instrument for the delivery of conversation, well, for the delivery of experiences, stories, ideas, but words, fundamentally. It's air moving from your lungs, through your windpipe, vibrating in your vocal cords, out of your palate, produces a sound. Comes out as your voice. So if you can align your posture, align your breath, and align your voice, it allows you, see, I'm already becoming aware of this, to cultivate an awareness of what's happening with you in the moment, what's happening with the people in the conversation. You are now right there with them, and they're right there with you, which allows you and them to focus on the ideas, stories, and experiences that you're sharing and the ideas, stories, and experiences that are being shared with you. You are now together working on something collectively. And that allows you to be responsive, to read and react to the things that are being shared in the moment, to be there with them, to get connected. And that in turn allows you to engage in the things that are starting to bubble up, the possibilities that are emerging from the conversation that you're having. And that can get you excited, which will in turn get you inspired to come up with new ideas, experiences, and stories that you're going to share with any number of people in any number of ways. We don't have time to go through the whole thing and to get you guys fully transformed. For that, I highly recommend checking out the website, which I'll plug in a minute, to start thinking about your own conversations. But I do want to get you guys relaxed. You're looking pretty relaxed to begin with, but let's do a quick exercise. And for the people at home, you can start to get relaxed too. If you're watching this live, I recommend doing it. Friday night, you might already be relaxed, but you can get even more relaxed this way. Okay. Before we get relaxed, again, you want to relax your body so that you can connect your ideas and experiences and stories to those of the people around you, the people you are conversing with, and ultimately transform. Set of opportunities available to you, your team, your industry, the world, potentially. This is going to have you write something down, but you don't need to write something down for this. Just in your mind, take a little note of how you're feeling right now, mentally and physically. What's going on with you? Are your thoughts drifting away to the past, something that's going to happen in the future, to something good, bad, right, wrong? Whatever's on your mind. Maybe there's something happening with you physically. Something aches, something you're excited about something. Just kind of be present with all of that. And now I want you to sit up as straight as you can for those people who are here, and just close your eyes. Close your eyes for a second. I want you to cultivate an awareness of your feet. Are they heavy, light, loose, tight? Be aware of your ankles and your knees, your hips, your midsection. Is it tense, tight, pulled in, loose, slack? Your shoulders, your neck, your jaw, your temples. Are they buzzing with fatigue? Are they burning with excitement? Cultivate now an awareness of the room. What sounds do you hear? The sound of my voice, the sound of maybe the camera buzzing, the AC. Cultivate an awareness of the temperature. Is it hot? Is it cool? Is it warm? Is it cold? And of anything in your visual field, even though your eyes are closed, and maybe your eyes at home are closed too, maybe they're pulses of light, something that you see, just whatever is there. Cultivate an awareness of anything that you smell. We had some pizza here, so maybe you smell that. The rug. Cultivate now an awareness of your thoughts, the past, the present, the future, of people, places, things, of any judgments that you're placing on yourself, others, situations, good, bad, indifferent. Be aware of any explanations that you're offering for those judgments and any conclusions that you're drawing. Now I want you to just breathe in through your nose to the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. And out through your mouth. 3, 2, 1. I want you to place your right hand on your diaphragm. It's just below your heart in the center of your chest. And I want you to inflate, breathe into that hand. To the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Breathe out. 3, 2, 1. One more time. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3. Breathe out. 3, 2, 1. You can let your hand rest on your knee. And I want you to breathe in one more time to the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. And when you breathe out, I want you to let go of all of those thoughts, feelings, experiences of the past, the present, the future, of people, places, things. And just be here in the moment. And breathe out. 3, 2, 1. You can open your eyes. How's everybody feeling? Huh? Kind of buzzed, yeah. So that buzz is the best part of being in a conversation, is where you are relaxed and you are right there and present. You're open. And the goal in any conversation is to cultivate that openness and to allow the other person to be open, because when you are both open, things start to happen. So, again, conversations, not a mind-bending thing, but all they have is a beginning, a middle, and an end. If you can be aware of where you are in the conversation, based on whether you're arguing about the context, about what's going to happen, whether you've moved past that and you're starting to hear stories and exchange stories and banter, or whether you are now in the place where you are creating a context. Part of the reason why people hate networking so much is that it seems as though you skip over the really fun part of the conversation, which is the telling of stories and the exchanging of ideas and experiences. So if you can get into that place quickly, you'll also know how to exit quickly. And you want to be able to relax, connect, and ultimately transform by being aware of your posture, breath, and voice, understanding the impact that the world is having on you, because you're constantly in motion, so that you can start to get into a space where you're aware of what's happening with you in the moment, and you can respond rather than react, because you are focused on the ideas, experiences, and stories that you want to share, and you are focused on the ideas, experiences, and stories that are being shared with you in turn. That's going to cultivate engagement. You are really there in the moment with a person, which will get you excited and in turn allow for possibilities to bubble up in ways that you don't expect. And above all else, have fun. Because if you're not having fun in the jobs and work that you're doing, then what's it really good for? Because you can have fun doing anything if you can start to understand where you are and where you want to go. And part of the work that I do is helping people understand where they are, where they want to go, and well, who they're being, and then ultimately where they want to go as a result of that. And I've helped people unpack their stories for interviews. I've helped people get jobs in their fields that they didn't otherwise think they could even get, or were possibilities. I've helped people get funding for ideas, experiences, companies. I helped a guy with a talk that he gave for the Cannes Interactive Film Festival about 3 or 4 years ago. Ended up winning the Gold Lion, spun that off into a company that's now it employs, I think, about 25 or 30 people. It's been used by the White House. I've worked with StoryCorps, I've worked for Spotify, I've worked for American Express, Google. I've been written up in the New York Times, Entrepreneur Magazine, and I help people shape their stories in a variety of contexts by helping them tap into their own conversations.